I still remember the day I started working as a pizza delivery guy. It was a hot summer evening, and I was excited to have a new job, despite my nerves about meeting new people. As an obese man, I'd grown accustomed to the snickers and stares, but I tried not to let it get to me. I put on my uniform, grabbed my keys, and headed to the pizza franchise, ready to start my first shift. As I walked in, I was greeted by my coworkers, a group of rowdy guys in their early 20s. They eyed me up and down, their smirks evident even under their attempts at fake smiles. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe they were just nervous themselves. But as the night went on, their jabs and jokes at my expense only intensified. "Hey, Tubby, you gonna make it through the night without getting winded?" one of them quipped as I loaded up my delivery bag. Another coworker snickered and chimed in, "Yeah, I hope you don't get stuck in any doorways." The laughter that followed made my stomach twist into knots. I tried to ignore them, focusing on my deliveries and attempting to make small talk with the customers. But the humiliation continued, relentless and suffocating. As I returned to the franchise, exhausted and defeated, I couldn't help but wonder if this was all I was worth. Was I really destined to spend my days as the punchline to someone else's cruel jokes? I finished my shift, avoiding eye contact with my coworkers as I clocked out. As I walked to my car, I felt the sting of tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. How long would I have to put up with this treatment? Was there more to life than just being the target of bullying and ridicule? The questions swirled in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me was screaming to break free. I'd hit rock bottom, or so I thought. Every door I knocked on, every pizza I delivered, felt like a reminder that I wasn't good enough. The snickers, the smirks, the motivational speeches from my manager, it was all taking a toll on me. I began to question everything. Was I worthy of respect? Was I even worthy of love? The doubts crept in like a thief in the night, stealing what little confidence I had left. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back at me. The spark that once fueled my dreams had fizzled out, replaced by a dull, suffocating mediocrity. I felt like I was just going through the motions, waiting for something, anything. A change, a miracle, a wake-up call. I didn't care what it was as long as it got me out of this rut. I started to ask myself some tough questions. What was I doing with my life? Was delivering pizzas really the best I could do? I knew I had more to offer, but every time I tried to convince myself of that, the voices of my bullies echoed in my mind, reminding me of my supposed limitations. It was like I was trapped in a prison of my own making, with no key in sight. Self-doubt had become my constant companion, my shadow, my scar. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for more, but what that more was, I had no idea. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change, but what and how? Those were the questions that kept me up at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling lost and alone. Little did I know the spark of change was just around the corner, waiting to ignite a fire that would change my life forever. As I trudged through my delivery routes, day in and day out, something inside me began to stir. It was a spark, a flame that flickered with every insult, every snicker, and every disapproving glance. Meanwhile, as I was struggling with my self-worth, a newfound passion started to take hold. I discovered that I had a fascination with the way businesses worked, how they ticked, and what made them successful. At first, it was just a passing interest. I'd observed the way my managers handled the pizza franchise, taking note of their decisions and wondering what I would do differently. But as time went on, my curiosity deepened. I began to see potential in the very same franchise that had been the source of my misery. I started to envision how I could improve it, how I could make it more efficient, and how I could turn it into a thriving enterprise. Entrepreneurship, a concept that had once seemed foreign and intimidating, now became an exciting prospect. I devoured books on business, listening to podcasts, and even taking online courses to learn more. My mind was abuzz with ideas, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of purpose. I started to see my job in a new light. I was no longer just a delivery driver. I was a student learning the ins and outs of the business. I took note of customer feedback, analyzed sales trends, and identified areas where the franchise could improve. My seed of ambition had been planted, and it was starting to sprout. But I had to ask myself, how could I turn this newfound interest into a reality? Could I really take the leap and turn my passion into a career? The doubt was still there, but for the first time, it was accompanied by a glimmer of hope. I still remember the fire that burned within me, the drive that pushed me to keep going, no matter what. As a consequence of my growing ambition, I started putting in extra effort to learn the ins and outs of the business. I would often show up to work hours before my shift, just to watch and learn from the manager as he prepped for the day. I would take note of everything, from how he handled the finances to how he managed the employees. I was determined to learn everything I could, and I was willing to do whatever it took to succeed. I made significant sacrifices to save money for my future plans. I would often skip meals or eat cheap, bland foods just to save a few bucks. I even went so far as to sell my beloved video games and electronics just to put a little extra money in the bank. My social life suffered too. I stopped going out with friends and family, opting instead to spend my free time reading business books and researching ways to improve my skills. I became obsessed with the idea of owning my own franchise, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make that dream a reality. People began to notice the change in me. My coworkers would comment on my newfound work ethic, and my manager even took notice of my dedication. He started giving me more responsibility, and I reveled in the challenge. But despite the progress I was making, I couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy that lingered within me. I still saw myself as the fat kid who got mocked by his customers. I still felt like I was stuck in that hole and I didn't know how to climb out. But I refused to give up. I kept pushing forward, pouring all of my energy into my work. And then something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything. I still remember the day I walked into that office, my heart racing with anticipation. Months of scrimping and saving had finally paid off, and I was about to make the most satisfying purchase of my life, the pizza franchise where I used to work. As I sat across from the previous owner, signing the papers and exchanging checks, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. All those late nights, early mornings, and endless miles driven had led to this moment. I was finally in control. The look on the faces of my former coworkers was priceless when I walked in as their new boss. I could see the mixture of shock, confusion, and embarrassment written all over their faces. The same people who had once mocked me, belittled me, and made me feel like I was worthless were now staring at me with a mix of fear and respect. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment, and began to address them. As you all know, I am now the proud owner of this franchise, I announced, my voice steady and firm. I want to assure you that things will be different from now on. I expect hard work, dedication, and most importantly, respect for each and every one of our customers. I paused, scanning the room to make sure I had their attention. And of course, I expect that same respect to be extended to me, your new boss. I could feel the power dynamics shifting, and it was intoxicating. The tables had turned, and I was now the one holding the reins. I was no longer the fat kid who was always the butt of their jokes. I was the one who had bought the franchise and was now paying their paychecks. As I looked around the room, I could see the realization dawning on their faces. They were now my employees, and I was the one in control. I couldn't help but wonder how they would react to this new situation. Would they be able to put aside their pride and work under me, or would they struggle to accept their new reality? Only time would tell. I'll never forget the look on their faces when I told them they were hired. The same people who had tormented me for years, calling me names and making my life as a pizza delivery guy a living hell, were now standing in front of me, smiling and shaking my hand. It was a surreal moment, but I knew exactly what I was doing. As their new boss, I had a unique opportunity to show them the kindness and mercy they had never shown me. But I also knew that I had to establish clear boundaries and expectations. I couldn't let them think they could just walk all over me again. "Listen, guys," I said, looking them straight in the eye. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I want you to know that I'm willing to put the past behind us and give you a fresh start. You'll be working under me now, and I expect you to treat me with respect." They nodded eagerly, still grinning from ear to ear. I could see the relief in their eyes, mixed with a hint of embarrassment. They knew they had treated me poorly, and now they were in a position where they had to answer to me. As they started working, I kept a close eye on them. I wanted to see if they would change their ways or continue to cause trouble. At first, they were model employees. They showed up on time, did their jobs without complaining, and even started to make an effort to be friendly. But as the days went by, I began to notice some old habits creeping back in. They would make snide comments to each other or try to take shortcuts on the job. I knew I had to address it right away. "Hey guys," I said, calling them into my office. "I wanted to talk to you about something. I know you're trying to do better, but I've noticed some old behaviors coming back. Let me remind you that I'm your boss now, and I won't tolerate any disrespect or laziness. You're representing my franchise, and I expect you to act accordingly." They looked at each other, then back at me. For a moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of the old animosity in their eyes. But then something shifted. They nodded, and one of them even apologized. "Sorry, boss," he said. "We'll do better." I smiled, feeling a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, these guys were capable of change after all. But only time would tell if they would truly learn to respect me and themselves. I still remember walking into the office on my first day as the franchise owner, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The same people who had once mocked me and made fun of my weight were now my employees. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to prove myself as a capable leader. As I started to get to know my employees better, I realized that some of them were struggling to respect me. They would whisper to each other, glance at my weight, and sometimes even make snide comments behind my back. It was disheartening, but I refused to let it get me down. Instead, I decided to earn their respect by showing them what I was capable of. I dove headfirst into the business, learning every aspect of the franchise and implementing new ideas to boost sales. I spent countless hours training new staff members, optimizing delivery routes, and listening to customer feedback. Slowly but surely, my employees started to take notice. They saw how dedicated I was to the business, how passionate I was about delivering excellent service, and how much I cared about the community. They began to respect me not just as their boss, but as a person. One of my employees, a young woman who had initially been one of the most skeptical, came up to me one day and said, "Hey, I just wanted to apologize for the way we treated you when you first started. You've really proved yourself, and I admire the way you run this business." It was a small moment, but it meant the world to me. As I gained confidence in my abilities, I started to assert myself more. I made tough decisions, like firing underperforming employees and introducing new policies to improve customer satisfaction. My employees saw that I was willing to make tough choices and stand by them, even if they weren't popular. Over time, I won over even the most resistant employees. They began to see me in a new light, as a capable leader who had their best interests at heart. The atmosphere at the office changed, becoming more positive and productive. We were all working together towards a common goal, and I was proud to be at the helm. But as my professional life was taking off, I couldn't help but wonder how my new status would affect my life outside of work. Would I still be the same person I had always been, or would my new role change me in ways I couldn't even imagine? The answer, I would soon find out, was both exhilarating and terrifying. As I stood there, looking out at the bustling pizza parlor I now owned, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. After gaining respect from my employees, I started to notice a change within myself too. The way I carried myself, the way I interacted with others, it was all starting to shift. I remember walking into the kitchen one day, and one of my former bullies, now an employee, looked up at me with a mix of surprise and admiration. I was giving orders, directing the flow of the kitchen, and he was taking direction from me. It was a surreal moment, but it was also a moment of clarity. I realized that I was capable of so much more than I ever thought possible. The protagonist I once was, the one who was mocked and belittled for his weight, was slowly fading away. In his place was a confident, self-assured individual who was taking charge of his life. I started to see myself in a new light, realizing that my potential was not limited by my weight or my past. I began to take more risks, to push myself outside of my comfort zone. I started to experiment with new recipes, to try new marketing strategies, and to connect with my customers on a deeper level. And you know what? It was working. The business was thriving, and I was thriving right along with it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was living up to my true potential. I was no longer held back by my own self-doubt and fear. I was free to be me, to pursue my passions, and to make a real difference in the world. As I looked out at the bustling pizza parlor, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would I continue to grow and expand the business? Would I be able to maintain this newfound confidence and self-esteem? Only time would tell, but for now, I was just going to enjoy the ride. I still remember the first time I stood outside my new pizza franchise, a sense of pride swelling in my chest. The bright colors and bold logo seemed to scream my triumph to the world. I'd done it. I'd bought the very franchise where I'd been mercilessly mocked for my weight just a few years prior. As the protagonist's confidence grows, so does their vision. I began to see opportunities to expand my business, to bring the same success to other communities. I started scouting out new locations, talking to investors, and making deals. Before long, I had a handful of new restaurants in the works. The feeling of creating jobs and opportunities for others was incredible. I remembered the struggles I'd faced, the shame and insecurity that had held me back for so long. And now, I was in a position to help others overcome their own challenges. The new locations flourished, and my franchise became a household name. People came from all over to taste my signature pizzas, to experience the welcoming atmosphere I'd worked so hard to create. The profits rolled in, and I found myself respected and admired by my peers. The irony was not lost on me. The same people who had once ridiculed me for my weight were now clamoring for a job at one of my restaurants. And I hired them not out of spite, but because I knew what it meant to be given a second chance. I paid them a fair wage, and I treated them with dignity and respect, exactly as I would have wanted to be treated all those years ago. But as I looked to the future, I knew that my journey was far from over. There were new challenges to be faced, new obstacles to be overcome. The question on everyone's mind was, what does the future hold for the protagonist? Would I continue to soar, or would I succumb to the pressures of success? Only time would tell, but for now, I was content to bask in the glow of my triumph. I still remember the day I first started delivering pizzas, the way people used to look at me, the way they'd whisper to each other as I walked by. It was like I was invisible, a ghost hovering on the periphery of society. But I wasn't invisible. I was a person with feelings and dreams and aspirations, and I was determined to prove it. As I look back on my journey, I'm struck by how far I've come. From being a struggling delivery driver to owning the very franchise that once employed me, it's been a wild ride. But it's not just about the external success. It's about the internal transformation that's taken place. I've grown from a timid, insecure individual to a confident and capable leader. I remember the way my bullies used to treat me, the way they'd mock my weight and call me names. But I didn't let that break me. Instead, I used it as fuel to drive me forward. And now I'm in a position where I can look them in the eye and say, "You used to mock me, but now you work for me." It's a feeling of closure, of vindication. But it's not just about revenge or one-upmanship. It's about growth and forgiveness. I've forgiven those who wronged me, not for their sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger and resentment only consumes you, and I refuse to let it define me. Instead, I've chosen to rise above, to focus on building a life that's filled with purpose and meaning. I'm proud of the person I've become, proud of the life I've built. I'm proud of the franchise I own and the people I employ. We're not just a team, we're a family. And I'm grateful for the journey that brought me here, for the struggles and the triumphs. As I look to the future, I know that there will be ups and downs, twists and turns, but I'm ready. I'm ready to face whatever comes my way, armed with the knowledge and experience I've gained. I'm ready to continue growing, to continue pushing myself to be the best version of myself. And as I close this chapter of my life, I know that I'm not the same person I was all those years ago. I'm stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I've come full circle, and I'm grateful for the journey.